Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. This is Ann DeSantis, Executive Director, with board member Carlos Solorzano for the Our Lady, Our Mother podcast series. And on this one, we are going to be discussing caretakers, those people who are caring for parents or children or neighbors, friends, whoever that is. And sometimes it can be an exhausting job and a lot of prayers are needed. So, Carlos, thank you so much again for joining me on this podcast.
Sure, my pleasure.
Thank you. As we always do, I love it when you just give people a little bit of information about you because we always get newcomers. So anything you want to share about your work and ministry?
Just my main work is teaching theology at a Catholic high school. It's here in Tucson called South Point Catholic High School. It's a Carmelite school, and occasionally do some public speaking. Sometimes at parishes, feeder schools, conferences, and just I feel like I'm taking wherever the Spirit leads me. And sometimes I'll be really busy, sometimes I'm not, but one of the things that I remind myself is that the work in the daily work in the classroom is very important. And so, that in itself is a big ministry. But I also like to be active doing other creative things outside of my work, and gives me a chance to meet a lot of different people and share a lot of our lives together.
Yeah, you've done so much, and you're also very musically talented, and we're so grateful for you on the board. And I should also mention that you're a speaker with the Catholic Speakers Organization. And in fact, I know you and I have a suggested series of talks that we can do. So just wanted to put that out there for anyone listening. If
Hmm.
you're interested, please do reach out. So, anyway, back to this discussion. Um, Carlos, what are your initial thoughts on those who are caretakers? I know, you and I both have parents, and
Hmm.
um, parents are getting older.
Yeah.
And aunts and uncles are getting older, neighbors. And even, sometimes children are those people that we're caretaking, right? I mean, if you have
Hmm.
children that are in your home, your own children, you are caretaking, right? So
Hmm.
I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Um, my personal experiences besides my own kids, my mother's getting up there in age, but I don't live close to her. But my sister has been helping her, so she's been telling me a little bit of what's going on. But it goes back to probably when my maternal grandmother was her final years. Us being aware of how much my mom's oldest sister was taking care of her. And I think she did a lot of it mainly because she was the closest to her geographically, and she was her firstborn, so I think she had this responsibility she felt. But that and my when my father's final years, my mother was caring for him, and I remember he had reached a certain point where it wasn't getting better, and my mom was pretty candid about a meeting they had with the doctor, and the doctor was mainly telling him, okay, here's what's going to happen to you as far as you losing mobility and your body beginning to fail you. And he actually told my mother, and there's going to be, you're going to have to do here's the things you're going to have to do for him. But he did mention to her, and I thought that was interesting, that there's going to be times you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get angry. And I think that what that taught me was we are also, the caretakers are also human. And you need to, one, take care of yourself, because they remind you that if you're not healthy, if you're not capable, you can't care for someone else. I mean, like, sometimes people will remind you that when you're on an airplane, if they ever have that, you lose cabin pressure, they even tell parents, put the mask on yourself first, then your child, because if you can't breathe, you can't help your child.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes, I mean, I haven't been directly in that situation, but from what I've seen, I think sometimes what I've noticed is sometimes the caretakers, and I think it's a very noble thought, is they'll say, well, yeah, they'll confess they've been frustrated or agitated or whatever, and they say they feel bad about it. And to me, right away, that's saying that they're cognizant of the fact that the person is having their struggles and they can't help it necessarily. But at the same time, you feel the way you feel. and you have a right to feel that way. And I know in some cases, like my sister has been telling me, my mom has, as her health has begun to decline, she's gotten really mean. And
Mm.
you're aware of that. I mean, and I do and I don't know how that feels. But I'm sure there's a lot of frustration there. But and in a lot of ways, my sister will say that her and my niece, they, okay, well, she's getting older, she's not well. I mean, it's not personal. But then my sister will say, yeah, it does bother me, it does hurt, but I'll survive. And I just remind her, look, I'm sorry you feel this has happened, not just that you feel this way. I'm sorry this has happened. And I remind her, you have a right to feel this way. You have a right to feel this way. I mean, you were even bringing up parents and children. I mean, parents, of course, you being a mom and all that, you would do anything for your kids. But, I think sometimes, and I was guilty of this also growing up. We don't always realize that children can hurt their parents, and we're all human and we all feel what we feel. So we have a right to feel whatever we're feeling. Now, of course, how we go about that is really where we see how much we would be Christ-like about it. But again, when we were talking our last discussion about Our Lady, and the idea is in their culture, obviously the fourth commandment, the honoring your mother and father. I mean, there was a huge, not just what is divinely appropriate, but in the Jewish culture, there was a huge emphasis on respecting your elders. I mean, like you have to take care of them. So, but we have to sit there and also think about these people in the ancient days, and this would include Mary and Joseph, etc., that they would have dealt with those same struggles. I mean, I'm sure we don't know from the Bible about Joseph's passing, but I'm sure he was ill. I'm sure, there were some frustrating moments for Mary and Jesus. They've been through that. I mean, we would assume that perhaps Mary and her own mother, when she, I'm sure, grew old and eventually passed away. Same thing with Joseph. So, these are experiences where when we're struggling with it and we take it to prayer, say, again, we know that she, as well as her son, knows what we're going through. And whether it was directly or obviously they had neighbors and other relatives and they would have been aware of what their other loved ones are going through as well.
Such wisdom there, as you always impart during all of our podcasts. One thing that really stood out to me with what you said when you were referring to your sister and your mother and that whole situation, when you said you didn't just say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, I'm sorry that it happened. I think that is a really wise thing to ponder upon, think about, right?
Mhm.
Because in all realities, in family life, there's different relationships with each person and one other person, say a mother and each one of her children,
Mhm.
or a friend and all of their different friends, right? So everybody has a different experience of that person and all the dynamics that go with that. So by your
Mhm.
saying, I'm sorry that that happened, is really recognizing her feelings and her experience. So I just think that's very wise for those who are listening to this podcast, who are caretakers, and just thinking about all of these things. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I also,
I
yeah, go on, go ahead.
I was gonna say I love how the Spirit leads us to really open doors. To be honest with you, the first time, besides my mother telling me of that conversation with the doctor and my father when he was digressing, one of the experiences that I was very eye-opening to me, and it's a little, it's related, but it's not directly related. At my previous school, we used to have this Christmas drive. And what we used to do was we would get presents for siblings who have siblings that are sick in the hospital. Because a lot of times, the parents are obviously giving a lot of attention to the sick child, obviously so. And the sibling who's not ill understands. They understand that there's a need for that. And of course they love their sibling. They're concerned and they're very worried for their parents and their sibling. And although there might be times a parent they can't really Christmas shop for their other kids, whether it's minimal or they can't at all. And of course, these kids are like, "Oh, mom, it's fine. Oh, dad, it's fine. I understand. I'm obviously my brother, my sister's ill." But it was just that I don't know whose idea it was. I thought it was wonderful. The idea was, well, let's get the other kids something just so they know that, hey, not that your parents aren't, they certainly are thinking about you, but we are all aware that, I mean, you still have that need to be acknowledged by your parents. There's a that relationship still exists, and I hate to say that the illness of the other sibling is interrupting it because it's not meant to, downgrade what's going on with the sick child, but at the same time, it is happening. So I just remember thinking, wow, I've never thought about that before. And I think that we're also living in a really good time when it comes to acknowledging certain needs. I'm really like, for example, a little off topic, but how we have such emphasis now on mental health. And there's certain employers that it's not just if you're physically sick, like you can take a mental health day, you could take a stress day, or people are saying, well, I had to leave this job or leave this situation for my mental health sake. And I thought, man, it's a good time to be alive.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And that is such a profound insight that yes, 2026, right? We got to remind ourselves we're in 2026
Yes.
now, right? That we are blessed in that way, that there is much more of an emphasis on the awareness of emotional, psychological, mental stress and illnesses,
Hmm.
right? So, and that could be part of caretaking too. It really is. It's a big part of caretaking. I had some points I wanted to share. They're just 7 points for caretakers for our listeners here. I'm just going to read through them, and then maybe we can just discuss some of them as we
Hmm.
kind of head toward the end of the podcast. In not quite yet, but in a little bit. Number one is to remember that caretaking is a vocation rooted in love, not perfection. Second is draw strength from prayer and the sacraments, especially in moments of fatigue, and our Blessed Mother, right?
Hmm.
And next one on the list, excuse me, is see Christ in the person you care for, even on the most difficult days. Fourth is accept help humbly, recognizing that you're not meant to carry everything alone. Fifth is practice self care as a moral responsibility, not as a selfish act. Sixth is offer daily struggles to God as a quiet form of sacrifice. And seven, these are 7 points, trust that God's grace fills the gaps where human strength falls short. So just a little bit of wisdom there. And I didn't know, did anything kind of pop out to you as I read that list, Carlos?
All of it, but
Okay.
what actually popped into my head, and these are my mother and I when she was younger, we used to love to have these what if conversations. And I think right away when you read through those, I was thinking of the different gospel stories where Jesus encounters a person who's ill, especially when someone comes to get him, the parent or my Peter's mother-in-law, whatever, when they come to get him, that we want your help. I would make it when hearing your list made me wonder what interactions did he have with the person who sought him for their loved one and or the people who may have been in the room caring for that person. Whether he said something to them that comforted them, whether he just gave them a look that allowed them to be acknowledged, that he recognized what they did for this person. Because one of the things about the caretaking, and this is where it gets a little tough, is I know there's also cases where you have a sibling or a relative who won't help, and that's hard for the other person because there's certainly those moments where well, it's your parent too, it's your whatever, and they won't help. And going back to my aunt, like I said, I mean she was practically the closest one to my grandmother, and I remember at my grandmother's funeral because one of my mom's brothers is a priest, so he presided at the funeral when he did the eulogy as well. And one of the things he pointed out was he thanked my aunt for caring for her. He thanked, well, her oldest child, well, my oldest cousin was helping her. And one of my uncles who happened, he was living at home. He acknowledged them at the during the eulogy. And we all looked over and you could see it was, it was moving. And at the cemetery, when there were crosses on the coffin, he only had three and he gave it to them.
Mm,
And we all, it wasn't really spoken too much, but we all were like, yeah, they deserve it. It was like they were, and they didn't do it for the credit because obviously at that moment, we're burying my grandmother, so it's not the moment we wanted in her life. But I mean, they were seen, and I think it was seen by the family, but also there was we're at a funeral, we're at the funeral mass that we were seen by Christ. So I am certain, going to the idea of my mother and I having those what if conversations, I am certain at those moments Christ said something to those loved ones who sought him out, the ones who were where that person may have been to care for that sick person. And in a lot of ways, we want to be seen, we want to be known, we want to be acknowledged. And obviously, the mistake that we all make in life is wanting it from the world that we live in. But the most important is by Christ. And so, like the list you were reading, you when you bind it to Christ's suffering, but we also have to remember that Christ sees what you're doing. We were commanded to, visit the sick and those in prison. Well, that's what we're doing is we're taking care of that person. And I know sometimes the sick person, depending how cognizant they are, they feel like a burden. And they'll have those conversations like you shouldn't have to be taking care of me and etc. They feel guilty too. So it's hard. It's hard on everybody. I mean, I remember when years ago I had broken my leg and I'm not a person that asks people to do things for me. And I remember I just, was tired because I was getting used to crutches and even when I had the walking boot, it was kind of hard to do it, get tired. And I had asked my daughter at the time, she might have been about 10 or 11. I said, can you warm me up some tea? Yeah, Dad, no problem. And she brings it over to me, and I go, I'm so sorry. I wanted to get up, but I'm just tired. My leg is hurting. And Dad, it's okay. I mean, your leg's broken and you need to sit down and rest. But I kept apologizing to her. I'm like, I'm sorry that I had to interrupt you to do this for me, you know? So there's a lot of pain that, everyone's going through, including the sick person. And um, I do know my mom and my father-in-law who's aging as well. They would say a lot of times, it's frustrating to not be able to do the things I'm used to doing. And it's heartbreaking because, you just want to get up and, sometimes it could be something as simple as cleaning the house or, just working on my yard or, the hobbies you have, whatever. You just want to be you, and now you're in a situation where you can't do it.
yeah, exactly. And such wisdom again. We all have wisdom, I think, in our own lives in terms of our experiences, right? No one can ever deny experiences that we've had, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there, we can always deny facts or figures or, historical things, but what we've experienced is our own life, right? And so that
Hmm.
makes a real difference with understanding people, understanding others, and even understanding ourselves. And I think when it comes to caretaking, we need to be gentle with ourselves. And on the topic of the Blessed Mother, where does she fall into all of this? Is that you can pray to her, right? You can
Hmm.
intercede through your rosaries and through looking at that relationship between Christ and his mother. I know we're kind of coming toward the end of the podcast pretty soon, but I wondered if you could just share a little bit about your book that you wrote about the relationship between the Blessed Mother and Jesus. Just give people a little bit of information there because this podcast has all to do with the Blessed Mother.
Thank you. It's called I Am His Mother, and it basically it's like a fictitious memoir she wrote. That's the fictitious part was we know she didn't write one, but it's all based on the human story of her with him through his whole life. And it's interesting because when I was listening to the last part you were saying, well, one of the things that popped in my head as far as caretaking, and you mentioned children, and of course that would include your children when they're older. I was always amazed, if you think about it, especially at the Passion and the foot of the cross, was Mary had to basically go against every intuitive thing a mother would feel or do for their child because she had to let God's will be. And I think obviously the most important thing for him was she was there. She's been through that. Like sometimes we don't have to have the direct experience. Like obviously she didn't care for him while he was dying in the hospital, but she was there with him while he was dying. She was there with him when he was rejected, all of those things that happened. And I've always said, like anyone who's ever seen The Passion of the Christ, everyone, a lot of parents talk about the scene where, he falls and she has that flashback where he's falls as a child. I mean, oh, that's always hard to watch. I always notice when she runs to him, and right before he says the line, I'm making all things new, kind of looks at her. And maybe it's just my perspective, but it's almost like he smiles. Like he's, you know, mom's here. Mom's here. And I think too for us, not just praying to her and the spiritual guidance, but she's there. She's there. Like when we pray the rosary, we're always taught how we're praying with her. Well, she's there. So in that prayer, I mean, maybe that would be the best time to pray the rosary when you're with the person, like say they're ill, they're sleeping. Okay, well, you're concerned, you love them, you're hurting, whatever it is. Well, just she's there. And a lot of times when we're struggling, I mean, it's just nice to know that we're not on our own. So I think that that's probably the big thing that we can get from this. But also, I think that was one of the things in the book I was trying to show was that he certainly had moments where, as an adult man, as a minister of what he did, he had to be that man and go and lead his people and seek them out, whatever. But there were certainly moments that he needed her. He needed her there, and just whether he said it or not, it was just she was there. And it's interesting because there was a reason why she was there. And then even after his resurrection and his ascension, I mean, it was obviously important to the church that she was there. I mean, that was the beginning of her being our mother, John at the cross, and just she's been with all of us for that.
Mm, that's so beautiful. Something to really ponder. And for our audience who are maybe going through some things, being a caretaker, it's not an easy thing. And knowing that we have our Blessed Mother, who is our mother too, as you said,
Hmm.
she's the mother of the church. And so it is an amazing thought and an amazing reality for all of us to really pray and think about. And I just want to remind all of you who are listening about those free services that we offer at our website, nonnatus.org, is that we offer a free pastoral consultation with a priest. That can be either a phone call, a Google Meet, or even in person if you're in the Philadelphia area or one of our Mercedarian areas. So just reach out to us, make that appointment. We have that free uh, pastoral prayer line as well that you can email us your prayer intentions, and we're always happy to do that. We also offer our podcast and our retreats in the Philadelphia area. So thank you so much for visiting us and for listening to this podcast. We're so grateful. And Carlos, I want to thank you for being my co host. We're the first Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. on the Philly Nonnatus YouTube channel. So please like and subscribe, and also on SoundCloud as well. So, Carlos, any final words before we end?
Well, I know when we're recording this on January 2nd, so I'm just hoping everyone's having a good beginning of the new year. Just it's never, there's nothing wrong with, wanting to be heard. That, you have a right to express how you're feeling, if the caretakers that are, struggling, or if they're just tired, if they sometimes, hey, I need some help. I mean, all of those are valid. We all are praying for you. We know what you're doing. It may be just a child has the flu and they're down for a week and then life goes on, but still that's a struggle. So, we're there with you. I think we should I'm always looking for different people to pray for. And like when I do my sorrowful mysteries of the rosary, I always think of different people that are suffering. And this discussion is making me think I should, not just for the ill, but for their caretakers, to pray for them, because especially those who are close to them, they're hurting, and they're maybe wondering why this is happening too, whatever struggles they're going through. So we need to pray for them daily.
Amen. Prayer is such a big thing. And as the title of this podcast suggests, Our Lady, our Mother, what a better person to pray for than Mary? I don't think there is.
Hmm.
So, and she prays, obviously, she was always pointing to our Lord, too. We know that. So, again, Carlos, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I just want to mention one more thing, everyone. Go to nonatus.org. We also have a helpful resource page with outside resources there so you can learn more about other resources for you and your family. God bless, and we will see you next time.